From the highest sea cliffs in Europe, Slieve League in Donegal, to the majestic Tork waterfall in Kerry, this wild Atlantic way is painted with passion. Olga Malocco, a native of Galway, grew up surrounded by art in all its forms. Olga's interest in art started at a very young age and was encouraged throughout her school days, where she was an honours student in art. As a mature student, Olga studied communication arts and majored in journalism at Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada. She has worked in television, newspapers and magazines in Ireland and Canada. Returning to Ireland in 1998, Olga set about working and eventually opening her own business, Your Publishing Limited, which she has run for the past 8 years. Over 10 years ago, Olga's love for art was reignited when she enrolled for classes with the Painting Studio under the guidance of the highly acclaimed artist Grace Cunningham. She has also attended many workshops delivered by various artists in Galway and around the country and is a member of Plena Era West. Connemara is where she loves to spend her time, photographing, painting and absorbing the essence that is Connemara. Olga tells us, "There is simply nowhere on the planet quite like it. It steals your soul and returns it to you in its purest form. The western seaboard from Donegal to Kerry is a wild and wondrous scape, constantly changing, always surprising, fresh and new." While this is Olga's first solo exhibition, she has paintings in private collections in Ireland, England, Germany and Canada. Her work is exciting and varied. She experiments with brush and palette knife, with realism, impressionism and abstract, each revealing another layer of artistry that is constantly evolving, refreshingly new and engaging. Olga concludes, art, like life, should be nurtured, treasured and enjoyed. The longer you live, the more you realize how precious it is.
he said, I now want to introduce to you Miss Boat Show 1975. And I always remember standing back and saying, who is your one? One of the lads said, that's one of the Malacos from Main Guard Street. That was the first time I'd ever seen Olga. And ladies and gentlemen, Michael Lowry's in a bit of trouble at the moment. He made some inference about some person not looking too bad. Well, I'm telling you, had he seen Olga Malaco back in 1975, he'd have lost his dog seat instantly because she was absolutely stunning. I will never forget seeing this goddess appear onto the stage, and she was absolutely brilliant. Now, unfortunately, whatever it was about the 1970s, impure thoughts in the church were inextricably linked. And the very next time I saw Olga Malaco was at Mass the next morning. 11 o'clock Mass in the Ollie. Sonny Malloy had just finished singing the old Paris Angelicas, and there was a procession up the church. And it was led by a man who had the widest shoulders that I have ever seen. They were even wider than yours, Marco. Where's Marco gone? He had a navy suit on him, and he had a white shirt, and he had a red tie, and he had a red carnation. And Joe Malaco wore a red carnation every day of his life. And he was the most stunning looking, dapper, handsome man that you ever saw. And Joe proceeded up the chapel. And he was followed, I'm sorry Marco, you were probably there but I didn't remember you. He was followed by 5 daughters, the 5 Malaco girls. And my mother rapped my knuckles and she said, lift up thine eyes to the Lord, whence cometh thy peace. But I swear to God, no matter how hard I looked up at the Lord that day, I kept having my attention diverted back to the Malaco sisters. Ladies and gentlemen, after Mass, in fact I often think, and I see Mary Comer here, so I better get this one right. The Saw Doctors afterwards were renowned for a brilliant song called I Used to Love Her. Do you remember that? And there was a stanza in it called I used to see her at the chapel when she went to Sunday Mass. And when she'd go up to receive, I'd kneel down there and watch her pass. Now, if you want to know the 5th line, my wife Anne, she deleted it from the edited version of my speech. And Laura Gagan said that was a wife move. If you want to know the 5th line, I'll tell it to you in the bar afterwards for the price of a pint. But in any event, ladies and gentlemen, the procession continued. Up they went to communion, and after Mass, Joe Malaco led the whole family out. And they would walk up Buttermilk Lane, and this puts Olga's wild Atlantic way into perspective. They went across the street, and they went to the family business and the family home, the Genoa bar, and upstairs the house. And if you were to have read the City Tribune on Friday, you'll understand the first component of Olga Malaco. It's pure out and out family. I want you to try and picture, I want to load in here, I tried to picture it, I might add, but if you could picture 5 sisters, 5 brothers, and Joe and Lily Malaco sitting down to have a meal. What a fantastic sight. 12 people having lunch on a Sunday. And if you've ever had Malaco spaghetti, go on, tell us about Malaco spaghetti. And what the Malacos were really famous for is actually Malaco's ice cream. Am I right in that? So if you can imagine, and Phyllis, Olga's godmother's nodding her head, if you can imagine this family, that's the first major influence on the artistic wonders you see here today. A fusion of the, I always remember Carl McGowan, who was head of the Ross and West, the fantastic businessman. I heard him in Milan once, and he got on the stage and he said, if we could only combine the inherent, innate creativity of the Italians with the communication skills of the Irish, and we've got the ultimate answer. Ladies and gentlemen, you have got the creativity and design skills of the Italians married to the finest communication skills of the Irish. And that's what you see in every one of those paintings. So it's no surprise, ladies and gentlemen, that about 6 of the 30 paintings on display were at the very first part of Olga's Wild Atlantic Way. You've got High Street on a Rainy Day Galway, Main Guard Street Musicians, Alone of the Claddagh, the Genoa Cafe, Buskers and Lovers, and Journey's End Claddagh. Now for those of you who aren't from Galway, you know, if you hang a right from the Genoa, it's only 200 yards to O'Brien's Bridge where the current meets the Atlantic. That's the first stage of the Atlantic. Now, if you actually took the long way to the Atlantic from Main Guard Street, and if you went 300 yards via High Street, you would also hit the Atlantic. So it's absolutely the very first stage on Olga's Wild Atlantic Way, which was Main Guard Street and the Genoa. I gather Mrs. Brown is very much the rage in Northern Ireland and England at the moment. I heard Brendan O'Carroll ask recently, what did he ascribe his success to? And he was absolutely out. He said, I was so lucky to be inviolably told by my mother that I could do anything I possibly wanted to do. He said, I was brought up with that belief. He said, I could do no wrong. I think she was a Labour TD way back in the early days. And he said, nothing is a problem to me. And Olga was exactly the same. When you speak with Olga, as I did on Friday, she talks a lot about her mother Lily and the influence that Lily had on her. Absolutely wonderful lady. And once again, her great friend Phil O'Connell, who's, I beg your pardon, Ruth O'Connell, who's Olga's godmother, is here today to celebrate Olga's exhibition. And you know the really interesting thing? I'm a great believer in numerology. Had Lily lived, no, it was Lily's 19th anniversary today, isn't that right, Olga? Imagine that for a coincidence. How proud would Joe and Lily Malacco have been to have seen Olga today, on the day of her anniversary?
Yeah.
The other big point about going back to Main Guard Street was the sense of family. And it was a really beautiful thing to read in the Connaught Tribune when Olga was asked what her greatest achievements are. Now, many of us, Tony, Rosalie, Anthony, Don, myself, we knew her as a hugely achieving person in junior chamber. Yet Olga's first inference was, she said, being mother to my two kids. And I know Elizabeth's throwing her eyes up to heaven saying, what's he going to say here next? Long before children were brought into the Skeff and other pubs in this town, we spent many days with Will and Elizabeth, and I'm delighted to see what such fine children they are. And Olga said to me the last day, she said, you know, the greatest motivation for me putting this exhibition together was the belief that my kids showed in me. And she said, the greatest fear that I have is that I may not live up to the brilliant beliefs that they have. So once again, what an outstanding way to actually have a family that believes in you so much. I know Will, and indeed Elizabeth, you've absolutely paved the way for her getting here today, and she's hugely grateful to you for that. Well, thank you very much to Will and Elizabeth. If you wonder about the influence of a mother on the life of an artist, or the life of anybody for that matter, I'll just draw your attention to another artist whose mother once said, if you were a soldier, you will become a general. Isn't that a bit of cockiness? If you are a priest, you will become the Pope. But me, I was a painter, and I became Picasso. And it just shows you the power of belief. And Olga was brought up with this brilliant belief. Okay, let's move on a little bit. Olga went up to Taylor, spent to do the legal search, and she got another in art. And another in art way back in them days was hard to get. But folks, as Calvin Coolidge once said, talent is hugely overrated. There is nothing as common as talented people who are utterly unsuccessful. Talent does not guarantee progress or success. And it will be many years later. They say that when the student is ready, the master appears. And it's about 10 years ago that Olga met Grace Cunningham, isn't that right? And she went for her first art class. And Olga was explaining to me the last day that those first 2 hours were an epiphany. She lost herself in the canvas. She lost herself in paint. And that began a huge induction process into the maestro that she has become. So to Grace Cunningham, which is probably another little step farther out in the Barnet Atlantic Way, thank you very much. It was a hugely significant point on Olga's journey. Now, having said that, loads of people, they got the talent, they got the belief systems behind them. What they really need is a spark. Now, nothing like 5 women on the lash to create a spark. Would you agree with that, folks? Glenmore, I think you wrote a book on that at one stage. That's true, yeah. Anyway, we'll have to get the name of that book again. Okay, I gather it was on the Wild Atlantic Way again. A restaurant. Somebody's putting up their hand here. nights to hide, and Maggie Ryan and Olga were out one night. And the women said, this is fantastic stuff that you're doing. You really need to go public with this. And in fairness to those ladies, they got behind her that night, and they gave her that impetus that was needed. And in fact, Maggie Ryan went one step farther. She said, if you go and do this, we will back you the whole way on the Ardalon. And in fairness to John and Maggie Ryan, they put up this wonderful, wonderful reception today in this wonderful environment. So thank you so much on behalf of Olga to the Ryans. But you know what? You can even have the spark, and it may not force you to get out there. 3 weeks ago, a number of junior chamber oldies, a lot of you are in the room here, Comer, myself, and Anthony, and a few of us, and Don, and we were out having this old traditional thing called a senator's brunch, and it happens every year, and it's the most unusual thing. You begin with a steak breakfast at 10:30, followed by copious amounts of pints, and red wine and white wine, or whatever you can drink. Anyway, at about 1 o'clock, I had to repair to the gents. Now, I gather a much more interesting thing happens in the ladies' loot, but I'm not entirely sure. But in any event, I went in, and upon concluding my business there, I was joined by Don Colleran. And as I was, Don was down there trying to hide. And unfortunately, as Don was proceeding to do his business, he unwittingly dropped a €5 note into the Ardalon urinal. It was most unfortunate as it lay there in the swirl, and I was intrigued. I said, what's he going to do? I didn't say anything, but I looked at him. Quick as a wink, he took his wallet out of his pocket, he took out a €50 note, and he threw it into the urinal. I couldn't believe this. And then he happily proceeded to pick up the €50 note and the fiver, and he uncomfortably put the fiver in front of my nose, and he says, you didn't think I was going to put my hand in for that, did you? You get it? That, ladies and gentlemen, is commitment, so it is. And you know what? You do have to go public. It is not easy to put your 30 prints up here and put them in front of the public and I don't like that colour, and there's too much of Connemara there, why don't you do a bit of Barcelona or whatever? It is, and it takes bottling, it takes gumption, and it takes guts to go out there. I mean, I think it was Brendan Behan we used to often hear. Behan was well acquainted with critics. And at the conclusion of a play he had launched in his States, and he was quite happy with it. A critic, are any of the Malaccos from Cavan here? No, that's okay. Didn't a critic come up to Behan afterwards, and of all places, wasn't he from Cavan? And he came up to me and he was fierce annoyed. He said, that's terrible stuff. He says, the language you used in that play is absolutely vile. You should be ashamed of yourself. And Behan was dying for a drink, and he was a bit agitated, he was a bit cranky. And he says, you know what, he says, you critics, yous are all the same. Yous are like eunuchs in a harem. Yous are watching it every night, yet yous can't do it yourselves. And that was Behan's response to critics. And in fairness to Olga Malacco, she's got out here. She's put the paint on the canvas, and she's put 30 brilliant paintings together. It's an absolute tribute to her. Now, I would say to you, Mar Ucachgurn, in conclusion, this is an exhibition. And what it is to get the paintings out there, I don't think she needs to, because I see so many red dots. I would encourage you, this exhibition finishes this afternoon. It's not going on for weeks, and you do need to make a decision. In business circles, they call it closing the sale. I'll give you one little good example of mine. Last May, before I ran into trouble, I had taken up kite surfing, and I had applied to do kite surfing lessons in Lahinch with the best instructor, a guy called Kevin Kelly. And the Saturday night prior to me going down to Lahinch, I was out with Anne and we were having a few drinks. You know that precipitous time when you say, I think I won't go kite surfing in the morning. And I got a little text from Kevin saying, bad news. And I thought he was going to say, I can't do the gig in the morning. He said, 3 nurses from Dublin want a lesson in the morning. He said, would you be prepared, the lesson was €100. He said, if I give it to you for €50 and we allow the 3 nurses in, will you do it? And I texted him back and I said, Paul, say mass, I'll see you at 9 o'clock. Ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon is your opportunity to make a decision. You know, art is really, really important. I met with all on Friday. It's a true story. and all the rest of them were somewhat true as well. But this one is really true. A guy called Colin O'Brien, and some of you may have heard him on Galway Bay FM on Friday morning. He was on the Keith Finnegan show. I did a session for beauties 20 years ago. And I used to put these postcards in the ground, and I would get people to visualise their life in 5 years' time. I was in Limerick one day, and this guy, Colin O'Brien, came up to me. He says, I owe you lunch. And I said, you're all right, you do not. He said, I do. I stole something on you once. And I said, what did you steal? He said, I'll never forget it. He took it out of his pocket, and it was a postcard. So I recognised the card because my name was on the back of it. It was sent to me. He said, I stole that from one of your sessions. And it was a photograph of a blue sky and an island and 2 trees. And he said, I was hemmed into a job I really didn't like at the time. And I looked at that card and that image, and it inspired me to get up and leave my safe, secure job and do something I really love to do. He said, I will put art and imagery as one of the great things that move me. This is not an investment of money. It will go up significantly. This is an investment in beauty and motivation. And great objects of beauty in your home and in your environment and in your business will hugely elevate the environment and the energy. 40 years ago, I stood in Letterland as a young, spotty 14-year-old, and I saw Tom O'Connor up with this goddess on stage. And I said, imagine being on stage with such a beautiful lady. I'm very happy to say, 40 years later, I get the opportunity to be on stage because she's still beautiful and she's an absolutely fabulous lady. Could I welcome up here Olga mwaw? Come up here, Olga. Jenny and Elizabeth and Will, I think you've got a presentation for your mum. Please, will you come on up, please? Come on up here. I'll start slagging you off if you don't come up quickly. These are the 2 little children Tony Ryder and I used to babysit up in the scaff 1,000 years ago. Do you remember that, Tony? I think Jenny is coming with them. Hold on, we've got them here, so we have. Yep.
We're so proud.
Jenny, do you want to go? Go with. And Jenny is Will's partner, and Anthony is doing the photography. And in fairness, I gather they've been working huge hours over the last 2 to 3 days. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to give a huge, as John Keys would say, round warm of applause to Olga mwaw. Well done, Olga.